Good morning, PMAppers and fellow people managers. How are you doing today? Would you be able to send me a chat or a comment of where you're located right now? So I just want to see if how far this webinar are reaching you. Because last time we had somebody from Nepal doing some checking on how we do it here in the Philippines. Okay, so I see some attendees coming from Cebu. Wow. Ms. Pinky Mante, I can see your comment. We have a lot of people attending now from Cebu, Bacoor City, Pasig City. Well, I'm in Pasig right now. Even from CDO, Pampanga. Keep the comments coming in. So we're right now broadcasted via Zoom. We also have via YouTube and Facebook. If only you can do this via TikTok, we'll do that. But basically, there's a 60-second restriction for video upload, so we cannot do it as of this moment. So right now, I would just like to greet you again a good morning, and on behalf of our officers and Board of Trustees, led by PIMA President Loy Echeverria, Executive Director in NR, we would like to welcome you on this special learning session brought to you by the Asian Institute of Human Resource Management, the training arm of PIMAP. Special thanks as well to our AIHRM President Lucy Tariella and our officers and trustees and all the PIMA professional staff for making this online learning session possible. Okay, so before we start, I just need to have a short introduction for our speakers. Definitely, we are very lucky to have our speaker because we consider him as one of pillars of our organization. Our speaker is currently the chairperson of Change Management International Inc., a columnist in People Manager magazine and the Philippine Daily Inquirer. Also, he has co-authored the PMAP book Personal Management in the 21st Century and author of the Human Resource Management from the Practitioner's Point of View. He is also a professional lecturer on corporate governance, human resource management, and labor relations. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome straight from his home. So basically, he's very excited to do this for the first time. Okay? Our PMAP president from 1989 to 1990, Attorney Ranulfo Payos DPM.
Thank you, Richard. Good morning to all of you.
Yes, sir.
A
So I'll
pleasant
be,
morning to all of you.
I'll be giving you the floor, or rather the screen, attorney, so you can
Hmm,
have all the time to do your lecture.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll be back during the
Uh,
Q&A portion.
sa mga Bisaya, maayong buntag kayong tanan, sa mga waray, maupay na aga. And I'm delighted to be with you in these 2 short hours of time discussing something. I'd like to thank Richard for his kind introduction, but there is one thing that I think Richard failed to mention about me. I happen to be an active member of the group called OPAL. You know what's OPAL? It's old people with active lifestyles. Yes, indeed. There are quite a number of us, OPAL, that are roaming around in PMAP, inspired to being retired. We'll stay around trying to hobnob with you, trying to touch base with you, to connect with you, especially the young people, the centennials, the millennials, the so-called Generation Zers, in the hope that somehow your infectious youth, your vehement vigor, will be able to rob us. And that is the reason why we are very active and we are still around and we find life exciting as it was before. We are the people who are called the unretires. And you just have to bear with us because we'll still be with you and trying to learn from you. I hope the session that we'll be discussing this morning is about administering labor standards and benefits. This is found mostly in the labor code, particularly book 3 on working conditions, book 4 on health, safety, and social welfare benefits. But there are, of course, other legislations that are not found in the labor code, like anti-sexual harassment law, the paternity leave law, and others. And this we'll also discuss in the coming 1 hour or so. Labor code, let me just tell you a bit of history, background about labor code. As late as in the 60s, in the late 60s, there was already an attempt to codify the labor code. And when martial law was declared in 1972, shortly after that, about 1974, President Marcos, using his authoritarian rule, issued Presidential Decree 442, and that showed the birth of the labor code as we have now. And of course, the labor code, like any law, is not always static. It is always obeying. It has undergone several amendments. Even during martial law, Marcos, through his authoritarian power, issued several PDs amending the labor code, issued also the executive order, and right after he organized the transitory legislature called Batasang Pambansa, the Batasang Pambansa also enacted several bills approved by Marcos, amending the labor code. And when after the EDSA 1, when democracy was finally restored and Congress was reinstalled, Congress has on several occasions amended the labor code until the present time. So that is the history of our labor code. Okay. I still have to acquaint myself with this. And we hope that by these 2 short hours capsule time, you'll be able to understand better the complexities of the labor standards laws that are found in the labor code, as well as in the other social legislations, and that also after having understood that, you'll be able to implement that, because your execution and implementation of these labor standard laws carry your failure to execute that. It has some sanctions, civil and criminal, which includes imprisonment, fine, or imprisonment. And also, we also hope that at the end of this 2-hour session, after understanding the provisions of the labor standard laws that are found in the labor code and scattered in other social legislations, you'll be able to help enhance the image or brand of your company as an employer of choice. So let's proceed. The constitutional framework, this is the constitutional landscape of the labor standards. It is found in 2 provisions: the rights of workers, protect their special interests, or promote their general welfare. The Constitution also recognizes the right to work under humane conditions and to receive a living wage. And also, it is further enhanced by the Labor Code. In more detail, the Labor Code provided a lot of things that are not found in the Supreme Court, the Constitution, because the Constitution serves only as a framework. For example, in Article 3 of the Labor Code, it states the state shall afford protection to labor and assure the rights of workers to just and human conditions of work. This is to give flesh and meaning to the constitutional provision, which states that in the Constitution, which states that the country or the government affirms the primacy of labor as a socio-economic sector. That is the provision of the Constitution and amplified by the Labor Code. Other basis of labor standard laws: social justice. How is this defined? Social justice was broadly and brilliantly defined by the late Justice Laurel in his iconic Supreme Court decision that was done many, many years ago. And until now, the concept of social justice served as the guiding basis in all succeeding legislations on labor laws and labor standards. In simpler terms, social justice connotes equality and the attainment of decent quality of work life by workers for a decent, productive work, humane, productive work. That is the concept of social justice, and its influence, even if it was decided by the Supreme Court many years ago, about 4 or 5 decades ago, that is still very relevant until today. And even without the social justice concept, the real reason and foundation of labor standards and labor laws is the police power of the state. Even assuming that there is no constitution, there is no labor laws or labor code or social legislations, the police power of the state is there. It is an inherent power of the government to enact laws, of course, under constitutional limits, that promotes order, safety, welfare, and benefits and morale of the employees. That is the foundation of all labor laws and labor standards, the police power of the state. Okay, the labor code, the principal labor law of the country contains most of our labor laws. And these are social security law. These are the legislations that are found in the labor code. Social security law, agrarian reform law, the law on migrant workers. Other labor laws that are found in the code are 13th month pay law, the paternity leave law, and the law on sexual harassment. We'll discuss at the last portion more or less extensively with some jurisprudence. Labor legislation is broadly classified into labor standards and labor laws, labor relations. We'll just focus for this morning only labor standards, because the labor standards as a matter of concept sets out the minimum terms, conditions of employment that employers must provide and to which employees are entitled to as a matter of legal right. That is the concept of labor standards law. Like I said, the labor standards are found mostly in the labor code, particularly book 3 and book 4. And these are the essential elements of the labor standards. In addition to that are the other special legislations that are not still incorporated into the labor code. Working conditions excluded from these legal requirements on rest periods and overtime are government employees. They have a separate law that covers them, the civil service law and other laws. They are a class by itself. When you talk about working conditions and rest periods, you simply refer to as private sector employees. So the government is excluded from this particular mandate. Manager employees. The labor code has two classifications of manager employees, because manager employees is the generic term for all employees who belong to this class of employees. Managers per se is defined as those who have the power to lay down and execute policies that includes the power to hire, fire, lay off, recall, dismiss, retrench, and other personal actions. That is the definition of in the labor code of who are managers. Supervisors are those, as defined by the labor code, supervisors are those who can effectively recommend those powers as defined for managers, who can effectively recommend those actions, and those recommendations are not merely routinary or clinical in nature, but requires the use of sound judgment. Therefore, there are three elements in the definition of who are supervisors. First, his recommendations must be effective, meaning he enjoys the high regard and respect of top management, and almost always his recommendation, whether it is disciplinary action, whether it's a promotion or demotion, is always followed, almost always followed by top management. Number two, his recommendation is an exercise that is not merely routinary or clerical in nature, but requires, number three, the use of sound judgment. And having said that, just keep in mind that when the law here says who are exempted from the rest period and other working conditions requirements, it includes both managers and supervisors, because the generic words manager employees include those two categories of employees, as opposed to the so-called rank and file employees. The third one that are excluded from the working conditions and rest period requirements are the field personnel. Of course, the reason for this is very obvious. Field personnel, whether you're a collector, whether you're a credit investigator, whether you are an assessor or you're a field salesman, by the nature of their job, they're always out to the field. Their time cannot be controlled. In fact, they can rest in their houses, they can go elsewhere, they can go to nightclubs, take a round of beer. That is not a concern of management. What is very important is that at the end of the day, these field personnel will be able to deliver what they are supposed to do. And for the field salesmen, they have a certain quota. If they were able to achieve the quota at the end of the month, therefore they are not required to have rest periods because they have all their time, their own free time to go around, supposedly to sell. So those are the major reasons why they are excluded. And members of the family of the employer who are dependent on him for support. If, for example, the father hires his son or daughter and they are totally dependent on support, there is no need for a rest period because they are members of the family. They can get out on the work, take a rest or a nap, and that is not subject to disciplinary action. And the other one are the domestic helpers. While they are not really employees in the strict sense of the term, but the law itself, as we discussed later, they're considered as employees, but a class by itself. Domestic helpers are excluded because they have all the time. They can take a nap and they can take their rest, and for as long as they're entitled to some rest periods that we'll discuss later. But essentially, rest periods and overtime does not cover the domestic helpers. Okay. Workers paid by results. Workers paid by results are excluded because they are reckoned by the number of units that they produce, and therefore overtime is immaterial for them. What is important is that they deliver the required results on the Pacquiao method, whatever arrangement they have. All right. The number of hours of work for health personnel, this is special. Health personnel here includes the physicians, the nurses, nursing aides, lab technicians, psychologists, who else? The nursing aides and other medical health personnel that are found in the hospital. They're required to work only 8 hours a day for 5 days. That is by special law, or 40 hours per week. All right. And having said that, their work on the sixth day will really, if they work on the sixth day, they'll be already entitled to an additional compensation of 30% of the regular wage. And therefore, since their work is only 40 hours a week or 5 days a week, they're entitled to overtime rate if they work on the sixth day. Rest period of short duration is all required. Of course, the meal break should not be less than 60%. It is understood that if it is less than 60%, it is a paid meal break. All right. Night differential and overtime work. For work between 10 p.m. and 6 p.m., that is called as night work. An employee who works from 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. is entitled to at least 10% of regular wage. Although for some unionized companies, it could be higher, but the minimum regular night differential provided for by law is at least 10% of the regular wage. From 10 to 6 a.m., if it is an overtime work, the differential should be based on the overtime rate. Here is a question, if I may stop my discussion for a moment. There is a question coming from, let me just open my Bible. Let me see if I can answer this. And if I cannot, I'll make a study on that and answer it afterwards. How can I share? I have to share the screen. Oh my God. I cannot. All right. Oh, here's a question coming from, sent to me by Richard. Question, given the current COVID-19 situation, Dolly allowed temporary workplace flexible arrangements, which includes work from home, work day reductions, and etc. After most companies will still implement flexible work arrangements such as workday reductions due to work rotations and avoid groupings and follow physical distancing, etc. Given workday reductions are allowed. Is it allowed as well that during this time to reduce allowance or benefits, such as transportation allowances, rice allowances, and other allowances? In short, what she's saying, if it is a work from home, will there be a reduction? Let me read again. After ECQ, most companies will still implement flexible work arrangements, such as workday reductions due to work rotations, and avoid groupings and follow physical distancing, etc. Given workday reductions are allowed, is it allowed to as well during this time to reduce allowances or benefits, such as transportation allowances, rice allowances, and other allowances? My answer to this is it depends. If there is a collective bargaining agreement and it is provided for in the bargaining agreement, it is subject to negotiations with the union. In the absence of that, I think there should be reduction also, because the philosophy behind giving transportation allowance and rice allowance and other allowances are on assumption that it is under normal situations. This is under abnormal situations. I think this should also be reduced. That is my humble opinion. Particularly in the transportation, it is just logical that since he does not work all the time, naturally his transportation allowance should be reduced. In the case of rice allowances, I don't know, equity-wise, whether you work or not, you still need rice. So I'm going to amend my answer to that. I think for reasons of equity, for humane reasons, given the fact that labor standards, the underlying reason is social justice, I think in my humble view, in my humble opinion, the rice allowances should not be reduced if I were the company. But again, it depends on the company. Other allowances, I don't know, whether cost of living allowances. Well, if it is a cost of living allowances, you assume that it's attached to the basic pay. If you don't work, under the concept of no work, no pay, therefore, whatever allowances that are attached to that, if you don't work, there is also not such thing as allowance. Okay? Another question, how can companies conduct administrative hearings remotely while at ACQ? That's a very good question. Can it be counted? Can it be conducted through online? I think it can. The only problem here is there is no visible, unlike a face-to-face investigation. You can almost observe the body language, whether he's telling the truth or not, the reaction of the guy, or the reaction of management. Those are some difficulties that cannot be, those nuances cannot be observed in an online investigation. But practically, I think there can be it. As we are now on the digitalization era, plus the fact that we are now practically on a virtual mode, I think an investigation should be encouraged through online. That's my answer. Given some limitations, of course, as I was saying, your inability to observe the body language and somehow the intonation, the inflection of the voice. Because if there are changes in this, you can observe whether somebody is telling the truth or not. And the eyes, you can hardly observe that. in online investigation. Okay, let me see if there are other questions. There are none other questions. So let's proceed. You just wait for some call. This is an interactive, conversation. I don't mind to be interrupted. I don't mind to be asked questions for as long as I can answer it. If I cannot answer it, and I'll tell you. I do not profess to be an expert on everything about level standards. Okay? So let's proceed. If there is no question, let's just wait for some signals from Aya or from Richard. Work between 10 to 6 a.m. is overtime work. 10% differential should be based on the overtime rate. Therefore, if it is an overtime rate, you have to add it on. You have to recount that aside from adding the nighttime differential. Work beyond 8 hours is of course 105% because that is already an overtime rate. So in addition, you are looking at this instance of working at nighttime and also working overtime. And therefore, he's a total pay of 125% of his pay. For work on a holiday or rest day, everybody's entitled to a 1 day rest day after 7 days after each week. If suddenly during his rest day, for example, his rest day falls on a Monday, because as you know, the Blue Sunday law was already abolished. The rest day now can be any day, depending on arrangement between management and labor. So if your rest day is on a Monday and some exigencies of the service require that you are being called upon to work on that day, you are entitled to the rest day. Or if it is a holiday and you are being called to work on that holiday, you're entitled to your regular wage plus 30% or 130%. All right, let's proceed. Hope. For work between 10 or under time, all right, I forgot this. Under time should not be upset by overtime, meaning if an employee the day before went on another time instead of working 8 hours, he was a boss. I have something to do. Can I work under time? And therefore, I should be working only 5 hours. And then he's trying to pay that by working the next day, exceeding 8 hours, and he cannot say it is now paid. That cannot be done because the law is very strict. Once you work beyond 8 hours, you are entitled to the overtime rate. So undertime cannot be paid or offset by overtime. So that's very clear. Emergency work. The question is, overtime is an abnormal work. Ordinarily, in a normal situation, nobody can be forced to work overtime. And the management cannot penalize anybody who refuses to work overtime. But under this Article 89, overtime work can be compelled on emergency cases. It says here when the country is at war or in national emergency or declared by Congress or the president to prevent loss of life or property or in case of imminent change, danger to public safety due to actual or impending emergency caused by serious accidents like fire, floods, typhoons, earthquakes, epidemics, or other disaster or calamity, you can be forced to work. Now, let me just be cautious. There's a word here, epidemic. We are now under epidemic. In fact, we are now under endemic, as declared by the World Health Organization. I think this is an exception. You cannot be forced to work overtime because your life is at stake, and that's the reason why we are on enhanced community lockdown. So that should be not interpreted that way. But otherwise, in normal times, when there is an earthquake, floods, or other epidemics, you can be compelled to work. Next, urgent work to be done on machines, installations, or equipment to avoid serious loss or damage. You can be forced to work overtime. to prevent loss or damage to perishable goods. For example, your company is engaged in the manufacture of canned foods or bread or cake, and this cannot wait for the next ship. If there is a danger there that it will perish, you can be forced to work overtime. The third one is when continuation is necessary prevent to prevent serious obstruction or prejudice to the business or operations of employer. Note the word, to prevent serious obstruction is not merely ordinary, but serious obstruction or prejudice to the business or operations of the employer. In that case, you can be forced to work overtime. I think here's a question coming. So Richard, let me read this. This is from Lalaine Solis. Oh, wait a minute. Before that, here's another question from Ms. Ombre. Just to add to the previous question, will it be valid for a company to apply a no overtime policy? No overtime policy. Yes. But it would just seem to me unnatural for a company to have an overtime policy. Unless there are signs that there is abuse of overtime, then probably a company will be compelled to issue an overtime policy. But normally, there is an overtime required. Not only in manufacturing companies, but even in service companies, especially accounting, when there are closures and they have to do some reports, financial reports, in order to be able to meet the deadline. But the answer is normally yes, you can. All right. Here's a question from Ms. Lalin Solis. Can we still issue NTE with employees in this time of COVID-19? What's NTE? I don't understand what's NTE. Considering that there are some employees who are violating the code of conduct of the company, like disrespectful to the higher position, other employees giving false information, something like this. I think it refers, I don't know what's NTE. I'm not aware of this acronym, sorry. This is probably used by younger people, what's NTE. But let's look at the major content of the question. In this time of COVID-19, I'm sorry, Lalaine, until you describe to me what's NTE, I cannot answer that question. Let's go to the next question. We have a corporate event every January, and we usually extend until 2 to 3 a.m. Can this be considered as night differential for employees who are seated during the event? It depends. If they are participating in that corporate event, since it's an employer affair or employee affair, I think there is no need for a nighttime differential. But if he's there, it says here, if he is there for employees to assist him during the event, meaning he's probably putting up the stage, decorating it, or cleaning it, I think he's entitled to the nighttime differential. So it depends upon his role on that particular night. Okay. So let's wait for some other questions. Let's proceed. We are through with that. Let's go to the next slide. Weekly rest periods. Like I said earlier, for every 7 days, there must be 1 day rest period because the blue Sunday law was already abolished. However, keep in mind that while the 6 days can be done at the choice of the company, there are instances where an employee has a preferred day of a rest day, and that must be respected if it is due to religious grounds. For example, a Seventh-day Adventist, since Sabbath day or Saturday is sacred, holy to them, she can request her employer that it will be her rest day because it's a holiday for her. But she must notify that at least ahead of time so that the company can adjust and reallocate people to work on that particular day. Okay, can be required to work on a rest day under practically same circumstances that I provided before, that was provided for in Article 89. That is in times of war, floods, earthquakes, and other calamities. It can be the rest period can be you can be forced to work on the rest period under the same circumstances. All right. Compensation for rest days, Sunday or holiday work. Rest day is 30% of regular wage, meaning if you are required or compelled to work on your rest day for some extreme good reasons, you are entitled to a 30% additional wage in addition to your regular wage for that day. For a special holiday and you are forced to work on that special holiday, you are also entitled to receive a 30% of your regular wage, meaning you receive your regular wage. If your wage is, let's say, the minimum wage right now in Metro Manila or NCR is 535, you are entitled to 535 for working on that particular special day, plus 30% of that 535. Where holiday falls on your rest day, meaning your rest day falls on the holiday, then under the law, you're entitled, if you're required to work, you're entitled to 50% of your regular wage. Meaning if it is minimum wage of 535 plus 50% of that as your premium pay for working on that holiday, which happens to fall on your rest day. Okay. Here is some conflict here on the regular holidays. In fact, I missed one and I owe an apology. I missed May 1, Labor Day. So actually there are 10 regular holidays by virtue of the new law adding the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Fitr. And I think it's 11. I'm sorry, it's 11. And on election day, which is considered as a regular holiday, you're counting 12. But if there is no election, you're counting 11. Now, it so happened that for this year, the araw ng kagatingan, which is literally April 9, and that's a regular holiday, falls on a movable holiday, which is also a regular holiday, and that is Monday, Thursday. Monday, Thursday. Question: how shall it be paid? The Department of Labor issued these particular explanations of what's going to happen. For people who are working on a monthly basis, whether they work or not, it's just 100%. And even for daily paid employees, they're entitled to 100%. If it is a regular holiday, whether you work or not, you're entitled to 100%. For work on a holiday, you're entitled to 200%. Now, in this case of the double regular holiday, wherein since Monday, Thursday is a movable day by accident, it falls on the same day as another regular holiday, which is araw ng kagatingan. Therefore, even if you don't work, you're entitled to 200%. 100% for araw ng kagatingan, 100% for Monday, Thursday. The only condition that was also existing before is that provided the employee was present or absent with pay, remember the word, absent with pay, on the workday prior to the start of the enhanced community quarantine on March 17, 2020, under Labor Advisory 13, so that an employee who works on those particular day, that is April 9, is entitled to 300%. Okay, double. However, the Department of Labor issued another advisory 13A that was issued on April 1, which allows deferment of payment of these holidays in view of the present national emergency. Therefore, the bottom line is you are still duty bound and legally bound to pay 300% if you happen to be working on that particular, if your employees happen to be working on that particular day, but it can be deferred until normal operations are back. But note this particular last line. Companies that have totally, note the words, totally closed or ceased operations during the ACQ are exempted from paying these holidays. When you say totally close or cease operations, there is a strong probability that they are not coming back. Suppose they are coming back, I think they are duty bound to pay. That is my opinion, if they ever come back. But the word here, close or cease operations, seems to be permanent. And therefore, I think the Department of Labor was justified in saying that they're exempted from paying those holidays. All right. We have another question here. Let me see. Let me just, is service incentive leave? Service incentive question before we proceed to the question. Question from Catherine Florencio. Can employees claim for overtime pay while working from home? Can employees claim for overtime pay while working from home? How in the world will the company know that you're working overtime? You're working in the comfort of your home with your family. I think for fairness sake, do not claim overtime because nobody can see you. You can probably apply some kind of parallelism here. Look at the field personnel. They're exempted from claiming overtime because the company, the management has no control, absolute no control. Their time is under their control. So by the same token, applying your question, you cannot claim overtime because there is no way that the company can check whether you are working overtime or not. Unless perhaps you're engaged in a marathon session with your employer and it lasted for more than 8 hours. Then, until then, perhaps you can claim overtime because it is very clear. There is an incontrovertible proof that you have worked overtime because the employer knows, because he was in the other side, in the other end of the line, knows that you are working beyond 8 hours. But in the absence of that kind of conclusive proof, I think you cannot claim overtime for working at home. That's my answer. Thank you for that. From Ms. Charina Sonsa. What is the required percentage of employees take-home pay? Is there an existing legal basis on this? There is. In the case of deductions due to damage of the equipment of the company or damage of the goods that you have handled, the company has the right to deduct from your pay, but there are conditions. Maybe this in advance. Why don't we just wait for this because we have one slide on this that would deal with this. The only limitation here is I think the deductions on your pay must not exceed, I think it's 50% of your total weekly wage. And of course, there are other conditions like giving you a chance to due process the employees whether it is really attributable to him. Okay, so that's my short answer to that. What's called a percentage? Is there a legal basis? There are employees well compensated that are not entitled with premium pays. Another question from Lorraine Sosa. There are employees well compensated that are not entitled with premium pays. Overtime pay, rest day, etc. Is it lawful to exempt them as well from night differential? From night differential, good question. I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm not sure. You're talking about managers? Managers? Since the law is silent to this, as far as I know, I think they are entitled to do. Applying a particular provision of the labor code that in case of doubt, all doubts must be resolved in favor. That's my risky answer to that. Okay, I have to be honest and frank with you. I don't know if there are other questions here. If we have any time, what time is it? I think we can still entertain time. How about if you are on sick leave? This is from Sanika Katamora. How about if you are on your sick leave and they require you to work? Is it does it also fall on work on a rest day and 100%? You are required to work on your sick leave. That's criminal. Assuming that you are required to work on a sick leave and you agreed to work when you are sick, my answer to that is that it cannot be classified as a rest day. In the first place, it is the legal and moral duty of an employer to protect the health of an employee. For her or him to be required to work on a sick day, on a sick leave, that is almost criminal and immoral, inhuman. So it will not happen. Now, assuming that a crazy employee worked on a sick when he was sick and he was forced to, he cannot claim for an overtime or for an extra premium for that for working. Because he is not only stupid for risking his life, because he has a right to deny, he has a right to refuse. And if he agrees, he does it at his own risk. Okay? That's my answer to that. All right, let's proceed further. Or more. There are some more questions. I saw some signs here. Meron pa ba? Report percentage. I think I've answered them all. So let's wait for some more. Let's proceed. Service incentive leave and other leaves. 5 days incentive leave for employees who have rendered at least 1 year of service. This is assuming that the company does not provide any vacation leave at all. If it does, then it is more than 5 days, then they have satisfied the legal requirement. Okay. Solo parents leave of 7 days. So solo parent employees who have not who have rendered service for at least 1 year under the Solo Parents Welfare Act. Solo parent leave here, by the way, does not only refer to female employees, but also to male employees. Male employees whose wife probably is abroad working as a maid or working as a doctor, a nurse, or separated, or whatever is the reason. He is solo and taking care of his children. Therefore, he's entitled to 7 days leave. Okay. Battered women's leave of 10 days. That is in accordance with the convention that we have participated and signed, and that is called CEDAW. CEDAW means Convention on the Elimination of Any Discriminations Against Women. So any woman who is battered and can prove through a medical certificate and a certification issued by his barangay chairman is entitled to 10 days leave. Battered here includes physical. It is not only physical, it is psychological, economic, or sexual. Meaning if you force yourself, you're a husband, you force yourself upon your wife and your wife refuses to do so, you can even be accused of rape. Don't you know that? Because conjugal relationship must be consensual. And if you are a sadistic person, you made love to your wife, but you beat her, or tied her around the post, that is that is a taboo, and therefore a woman who suffered bruises and all that or was sick can claim 10 days leave under the battered women's leave law. Okay? So remember this. It is not only physical, it is not only psychological, meaning you have been abused by words, etc. Lagi kang minumura, or economic, you're not giving any money at all to feed yourself or feed your family. He keeps the money without giving you a single centavo. That is considered as battered woman. That is what considered as a battered woman. You're considered as a battered woman. And of course, sexual, as I've explained to you. So those are the elements of the battered women's leave. Just get a medical certificate, and the company has no other reason but to honor that and a certification from the barangay. And you can even apply for protection. The barangay is duty bound to protect you, to make you safe from harm from a man, from a husband who does not deserve to be your husband for beating you. Okay. The last one is special leave under the Magna Carta of women after a surgery caused by gynecological disorders. You are entitled, in addition to the maternity leave, you are entitled to 2 months leave with full pay. The only condition is that it is due to gynecological disorders, that something is wrong with your breast or your reproductive organs, etc., and there must be surgery. In the absence of those two elements, you are not entitled to such kind of leave of 2 months under the special Magna Carta of Women law. Okay. Wages. These are now go to the most emotive of all issues, pay. When you delay the pay of employee, you can create riot because they have to live, they have to feed. So the law is very particular about wages. Under Article 97, it says wage includes fair and reasonable value of board, lodging, or other facilities. This happens when you are probably in a mining site or in some hotels or motels where employees are entitled to some kind of board and lodging. Those are considered as facilities. But the law is very clear. It must be fair and reasonable. What is fair and reasonable, it depends upon any guidelines that are provided for by the Department of Labor. But for example, let's just take an illustration. If the minimum wage rate right now in Manila is 535 and you are working in a motel as a janitor or a chambermaid, and somehow you're required to stay in the motel because motels operate 24 hours, 7 days a week. And you're being charged for your board and lodging. You're provided with food and also lodging. And your 535 is deducted out of that 535. Your pay is deducted, let's say 70 or 100 pesos. I think in my own judgment that is fair and reasonable. So that your total take-home pay instead of 535, if it is 100 pesos deduction for facilities, therefore your total take-home pay is only 435. And that to me is fair and reasonable. Okay. Determined by following factors. This is major allowance of not more than 5 and 100% interest in the depreciated amount of capital invested by the employer and the rules 8 of implementing rules of book 3. Medyo malabo ito. These charges must be voluntarily accepted by the employee. But I think in real terms, just use your common sense. Do you charge, for example, if your minimum rate of your employee is 505, if you charge your facilities 50% of that, I think that's not fair. I think that's not fair. That's not enough for her or him to be able to go home and provide food, shelter, medicines, and schooling for his children. Common sense will tell you that is not fair and reasonable. So you just to play. by your own sense of what is fair and reasonable. Article 97 says where wage includes fair and reasonable value of board lodging facilities. Well, this has already explained. Cost of operation and maintenance, adequate depreciation plus reasonable. These charges, by the way, all these charges, by the way, in order to be legal, even if it is fair and reasonable, it must be duly and voluntarily accepted by the employee. In the absence of such consent or agreement by the employee, you cannot enact. All right? The law is very clear. These charges must be voluntarily accepted by the employee. Note the descriptive word voluntarily. There might be an agreement, but it is not voluntary, then that is still invalid, null and void. I have still 530 minutes now, Sabini. All right. All right. Questions? Other questions coming from others? What time is it? In my watch is 11. I still have 1 hour, or a total of 537. What's the message? Let's wait for this message. Other questions, Richard? Let me see. I hate to read this, but hindi ako nagbubuhat na sa libangan ko. It warms the cockles of my heart. From Catherine Florencio, Attorney Pius, normally I get bored listening to lawyers. But in this case, I'm enjoying listening to your casual but witty answers. Thank you very much. You made my day. Okay, let's hear questions. From Dina Grapilon. If Dole is in skeletal force work today, where can we submit the notice of redundancy? Oh my God, it's a good question. Oh, ano? Suppose you want to have a redundancy exercise, or you want to retrench. Where can we submit it? Can it be made via email? If email is allowed, is it deemed as filed with Dole? Or do we need to wait for the reply as confirmation for submission? What does the law provide on authorized causes? This pertains to authorized causes. The law requires that if it is redundancy, it talks about redundancy. If it is retrenchment due to losses, there must be notice, there must be pay of 1/2 month per service. But in all cases, whether it is just causes or authorized causes, in the case of authorized causes, that redundancy, first you must notify in writing. Remember the twin written notice rule? Notify in writing to the employee concerned that he or she will be redundated. Number two, notify in writing to the Department of Labor. So in answer to your question, yes, in spite of this emergency, you can notify to the Department of Labor by mail. Wait a minute, it says, sir, can it be mailed? Yes, it can be done. And your proof that you have sent it, the start of the counting of the 30 days notice, because this is redundancy, the start of the counting of the reckoning of the 30 days notice is for the time you mailed it. I suggest you mail it with registered mail with return card as proof that you have really sent it. Your receipt is a proof. And if you still need further proof, you can even later on, if it ripens a court case, you can even later on ask the postmaster to give you a certification that on that particular day, you have sent that particular notice to the Department of Labor. And therefore, you satisfy that requirement under the law. I hope that answers your question, Ms. Dina. Okay, another question here from Dina. temporary layoff for 6 months, do we need to submit financial statement with Dolly? Can we send it via email? Do we need to wait for reply or confirmation from Dolly? There is no need to wait for reply as long as you have sent the notice. Financial statement, yes, if it is due to financial distress. Remember that you can lay off your employees under the law for 6 months. Beyond 6 months, that is already termination for which you must pay separation pay. All right? So that answers your question. No more? So let's proceed. Thank you for these questions. Keep it coming. For as long as we have enough time, we'll proceed. If not, we'll just talk fast as we can. All right, let's turn to the next slide. Daily versus monthly paid employees. Daily are thus being paid daily, and monthly are thus being paid monthly. Now, how do you compute? How do you ensure yourself, if you're an employer, having monthly paid employees, that you are satisfying the minimum wage for that particular monthly employee? There is a formula for that. And here's the formula to determine, to check whether, to be sure that whether your monthly employee is satisfying the minimum wage law if you happen to be operating in NCR. Your monthly rate, which is 535, for example, times 12 divided by 365. If your daily rate reflects the 535, then you satisfy the minimum wage law or the minimum wage order as issued by the RTWPB of NCR. Okay? So that answers that question. The non-diminution benefits. All right, this is very common. I receive a lot of questions this in my seminar and even from some clients. Here is the concept of the non-diminution of benefits rule. Number one, it applies if the grant of benefits is based on express policy. In short, your policy must be clearly written or ripen into a, or, not the word conjunct, the word or, in the absence of express policy, or it has ripened into a practice over a long period of time, and the practice is consistent and deliberate. Therefore, the two elements are, it has ripened to a practice for a long period of time. It does not say how long is long. And the practice is consistent and deliberate, meaning it is really intentional. All right? Let's look further. It does not apply if due to an error in application of a doubtful question of law and correction is being done soon after discovery. Suppose you paid an employee and you thought that is the legal requirement, but really the legal requirement is less, and you correct that as soon as you discover that. And even he has been doing that for 3 or 4 years or 5 years, that does not violate the non-diminution of benefits, because there was an honest error in the application of a doubtful question of law, and pretty soon as you discovered it, you at once corrected it. The other one is if benefit being claimed is contingent or conditional, meaning even if you've enjoyed it for 5 or 10 years, for as long as that benefit is contingent on something. And let me illustrate. For example, a company has granted 14 months pay with an express policy that they will grant 14 months pay in addition to determined pay as a bonus, provided that every year the earnings is more than 10% of the budget. Now, for the last 5 years, it has been achieved. The earnings has been over 10% of the earnings budget, and therefore the employees were enjoying the 14 months pay. But suddenly, because of economic distress or some other reasons that the company suffered losses, they were not able to achieve that. It was less than 10%, or they even suffered a loss. Therefore, they canceled, they withdraw, or did not give them the 14 months pay. Are they violating the rule of the non-diminution of benefits rule? No. Simply because the benefit was contingent on something. And that contingency is on the achievement of more than 10% of earnings of the budget. Right? Very clear? Ah, let's proceed. Payment by results. Ito ng mga Pacquiao, piecework, other. There are some rules on that. Let's not delve deeper on that because that is very detailed. And in a way, Pacquiao by results is not common in major companies. All right. Two classes of piece rates, those that are approved, prescribed by orders of the dole, those that are not. Let's do that very quickly. Legal requirements regarding wages. No wages shall be paid by means of promissory note, vouchers, coupons, tickets, tokens, check, or any object after than the legal tender. The legal tender is cash, money. Now, can you pay it by check? Payment of wages by check or money order is allowed when it is customary or necessary because of special circumstances or specified in appropriate regulations of the Department of Labor Secretary or as stipulated in a CBA if you are unionized. Payment shall of course be always at least twice a month, not exceeding 16 days. That is a must. Payment through ATM is now allowed under the law. November 1996. I recall that very well because I was still very active in the corporate world. We introduced that. It created a furor dahil yung mga nagpapautang, hindi na makita. Those who borrowed money, the employees can no longer be found because they can get their money from the ATM in the respective places. Payment of wages should be at or near the place of work. That is understandable. All right, let's now go to the so-called Wage Rationalization Act. I don't know if we have time. I think we have enough time. Let me just tell the history about this very shortly, because I was part of this history. When after EDSA, before martial law, before during martial law, it was always a habit of the president, President Marcos, to give some kind of token, cash, wage increase to the workers every May 1, Labor Day, in lieu of the so many rights taken away from labor, right? The right to strike, etc. So it's more of paboya. So it has always become customary. It has also become customary for labor. I already got a notice here that I still have 25 minutes for the president to give a wage increase. So when during the time of Cory after EDSA, I was still then the corporate secretary of ECOP. We were summoned to Malacanang because Labor Day was coming, and we knew that the president is inclined to give wage increase. So I suggested stop this ritual following the Marcos era of giving Flores de Mayo. Let's say no to the president. To cut the story short, we went to Malacanang after the entry, after the audience with the labor workers union, and one by one we said no, and the president walked out from us. And after that we returned. There was a promise by the government from NEDA, from the Secretary of Labor, was then Frank Delon, my good friend, that if we'll agree just for once, we'll agree for an across-the-board wage increase. After this, there'll be a new law called Wage Rationalization Act. And that's the story. And the beauty of the Wage Rationalization Act, it is no longer across the board. Because the cost of living, for example, in summer is low compared with NCR. So why should you give one lump sum to every region when the cost of living in every region is different from each other? And that's why it's called Wage Rationalization Act. Okay, the creation of the National Wage and Productivity Commission, creation of the regional tripartite wage and productivity board in each region. And the beauty of this is that the composition of the regional wage and productivity board, it is tripartite in nature, 2 representatives from labor, 2 from the management, and aside from the regional head or regional director of the labor department as the chairman. The vice chairman are two, led by the regional director of NEDA and the regional director of DTI. The reason for that is the DTI and the NEDA, with due respect to the Secretary of Labor, are presumed to have a more balanced view of the whole picture of the situation, and they know what will be the effect of a wage increase that is too high and that will be deleterious to the economy of the country, and it will not attract more investors. That's why they are there, and here are the factors to be considered: demand for living wage, consumer price index, what's the wage basket, cost of living. For example, if this change of wage, this change of cost of living from 5 and this year 7%, more or less that's a guiding basis that at least you should give at least 7% wage increase for this year. The needs of workers and their families, the need to induce industries to invest in the work countryside, improvements of standard of living, the prevailing wage levels. All right. Distortion. Distortion may happen if, for example, the salary of a supervisor is, let's say, 1,000, and suddenly, by virtue of an increase, the amount of the increase given to somebody who is already a technician or professional or salesman is above 1,000. Naturally, the supervisor will squawk, and therefore this distortion. There can be also a compression. If the salary of supervisor is 1,000, and suddenly because of the wage increase, an ordinary rank and file employee is receiving 950. Therefore, the difference between the supervisor and the worker is only 50. There is therefore a so-called, not distortion, but compression. There is no more meaning in the wage classification or the job classification between the supervisor and a rank and file employee. So that should be resolved either through conciliation or through agreement with the two parties. If it cannot be resolved, it goes to the NCMV or to the voluntary arbitrator or to the NLRC for compulsory arbitration. But in the meantime, it has to be implemented, and it cannot be a cause for strike, meaning distortion or any issue distortion cannot be a reason for striking. Okay, protection for a special group of workers. Let's do this very quickly. I got a warning that I stand to reserve 25 minutes for interaction from you. So facilities for women provides proper seats for women, separate toilet and dressing room for them, establish a nursery and lactation room for nursing mothers, determine appropriate minimum age and other standards for retirement and termination of special occupation, such as those of flight attendants and the like. Okay, I think that is very common. Whether you should give some separate toilet for LGBT, there are some claims, but there's no not yet as of this time. For women workers, it should be unlawful to pay them lesser compensation if they are doing job that is all equal to what men are doing. That is a violation of that is discriminating against women. Favoring a male employee over a female employee with respect to promotion, training, study, and scholarship grants. To require condition employment or contingent employment that a female employee shall not get married. That is immoral. Meaning you sign a contract, we will employ you provided you will not get married. That's crazy. That is illegal, immoral. To discharge a woman on account of pregnancy. That is a violation. To dismiss on grounds of dishonesty or falsely stating that in an application that she is single. I think by falsifying her application, it is just as a reason of necessity because she is hungry, she cannot feed the mouths of her children, she has to falsify. And therefore, the law understands that, so excuses her from being fired because of falsifying her application that she's single when in fact she is married. Okay, employment of minors. If you are below 15 years of age, you can be employed for as long as you are under the working with your family, under the guardianship of under the directly supervised and under the responsibility of your parents or your guardian. From 15 to 18 years, the DOLSEC can determine some regulations. The only particular concern that I understand is that these shouldn't be assigned in hazardous works. And you know what are hazardous works. Those are employed in manufacturing of firecrackers, rockets, and other explosives, etc., or engage in the manufacture of chemicals that emits noxious fumes and the like. No person below 18 years of age shall be employed in an undertaking that is hazardous or deleterious in nature as determined by the Secretary of Labor. The law on domestic helpers, indeed, it is there. But you know that during the time of Senator Jingo Estrada, this was amended. And we have now a new domestic law, Republic Act 10361. It covers live in and live out domestic helpers. There must be a written contract in a language or dialect that they understood, and one copy given to them, another copy given to the barangay that it is registered in barangay. I don't know if this is compliant with right now. Wages shall not be less than 2,500 for NCR. It's 2,000 in chartered cities and 1,500 municipalities. I understand right now the NCR wage for minimum wage for domestic helpers is 5,000. Right? Wages which should be in cash are subject to review and adjustment by the wage boards, naturally, as has happened in CR. It has just been increased by NCR, as I understand. Peace slips must be issued. My God, you have to issue a peace slip. And of course, they are covered. The annual service incentive leave we pay for 5 days per year of service. In our case, our maids, we just take a leave for 1 month without even deducted. But that's the law. The law on domestic helpers, they're entitled to 13 May pay. Of course, they're entitled to 13 pay. All right. Rest periods of 8 hours per day to ensure that they'll be resting. Okay. They're entitled to rest period of 8 hours per day of 24 hours. Provide 3 meals per day. Although most employers, what in our case, what we eat is also eaten by our domestic helpers, but that's the law. Covered by SSS. They're covered by SSS, ECC, Fair Health, and Pag-ibig. They have the right to privacy. You cannot open their letters. That is a violation of their privacy. They have the right guaranteed to education and training if they wanted to. Okay. Termination of contract can be done by either party for just causes. Okay, let's do it very quickly. Night workers, as amended, that would mean those who work. I think we have already done this. This pertains particularly to those working in the BPOs. There must be suitable first aid facilities, safe and helpful working conditions, sleeping or resting quarters in the company, transportation from work premises to nearest point of residence, subject to exceptions provided for by law. This pertains particularly to, most especially, to call centers. Labor standard benefits under special social legislation, the maternity leave law, 105. It used to be 60 days. It's increased to 105. They can even extend it to another period, but it is without pay, but the maximum is 105. Now, the burning issue here is, of course, you can also assign 15 days for solo parent. The burning issue is how much is the reimbursement to be paid by the SS to you as an employer? The answer is varies. It varies. I think it's a function of the monthly salary credit, and therefore it varies. It cannot be deferred. In no case shall postnatal care be less than 60 days. ML shall be granted regardless of frequency, meaning regardless of frequency, kahit mga anak ka ng 5, 10, 15, or 20, you are still entitled to the extended, expanded maternity leave. So sana birth control dyan, sana productivity, productive law. Anyway, eligibility must have paid at least 3 month installments. notify the employer of your pregnancy in advance. This is the burning issue. How much shall we reimburse? Reimbursement is 100% of your average. It is your average daily salary equivalent. Remember, before the expanded maternity leave law, the entire 60 days you advance the pay as an employer, but you are entitled to 100% reimbursement. But under the expanded maternity leave, we have to spend more. It is not entirely or totally reimbursable. Here is one example which I got from the SSS. 105 days, her pay is 1,000, and look at the monthly salary credits. The reimbursement was out of the 105,000 pay. The reimbursement by the SSS to the employer was 70,000. The company shoulders 35%. It varies, like I said, depending upon the monthly salary credits and other factors. But in my own observation, the reimbursement, I think, ranges from 67 or 63% to about 70%. That's fair enough, rather than the total expenditure by the employer. Kawawa naman tayo. Okay, granted after termination. Suppose an employee has been terminated when she was pregnant and she delivers a child. Are you entitled to ML? Yes, provided that it happened not more than 15 calendar days after termination, because by that time, she has already acquired an accrued right to that. Let's do this very quickly, because these are very confirmations in the labor code, and you are aware of that. Whether you're required to have a first aider, whether you're required to have a full-time nurse, you're required to have full-time doctor, dentist, dental clinic, infirmary, you can check with that. But let's look at the new law, which was enacted just about 2 years ago. In fact, the implementing rules were just issued just very recently. And the new law has some requirements. Number one, right of workers to participate in compliance with the OS standards. Right of workers to be informed of some hazards. In short, you are duty bound to inform your employees, hey, mag-ingat ka dyan, there are hazards there. Right of workers to report any hazard and report accidents. The right to refuse unsafe work without threat. In short, the employee under this law has the right to refuse work if there is a hazardous thing in his work, and another condition, the corrective actions had not been undertaken by the employer, in spite of the notice done by the Department of Labor. On those instances, the worker is right to not to work, and he or she will not be subject to reprisal of the company, such as investigation leading to dismissal. The right of workers to PPE, meaning personal protective equipment, free of charge. Essential feature of the law, creation of OS committee. This is, noong araw, mayroon lang tayong safety committee. But the safety committee here is more or less more complex. Employers representative as ex-chairman, the safety officer of the company or project, in the case of project, a secretary, safety officer of the contractor, physicians, nurses, certified first aiders, and dentists as members ex officio, workers represented by the union if it is unionized, if it is not unionized, through election by majority vote of the workers. So that is the composition of the safety committee. In addition to that, there are other essential features of the new law. Training. All safety and health personnel must undergo training. All your workers must undergo training. So just keep that in mind. Because once the inspector comes to your place, they might ask you, was there any training? Do you have any proof of that? So be sure that they must have undertaken the 8-hour training. And the training must be done by a jury accredited trainer by the Bureau of Working Conditions and the OS. Okay? Other social legislations. 600 law. That is a very low law. The pag-ibig that was enacted during martial law to provide housing, the easy. What is important in the employment compensation is that if you have injury or accidents that are work connected, you're entitled. It leads to some disability, partial or total or death, you're entitled to compensation. And also, if you are sick and that sickness or injury or sickness was caused by or arising out of your employment or worsened by your employment, you're entitled to employment compensation if the sickness leads to disability, partial or total, or death. So that's the essence of the employment compensation law. The universal health insurance has just been enacted, but what I just want to emphasize to you that under these provisions of the which amended the Magna Carta for persons with disability, they are entitled to the total health. It shall be automatically covered by the health insurance, and premiums are shared equally by both government and company. Let's not deal with this for lack of material time. Is this enough that I mentioned that to you in passing? All right, the last portion that we have to discuss the anti-sexual harassment law. This is a law that is based, like I said, on CEDAW, which is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which we are a signatory, ratified by the Senate, and therefore that CEDAW is part of the law of the land. So on that basis, the Anti-Sexual Harassment Law, Republic Act 1787 was enacted by law, and that's the law. And there are three aspects that we have to discuss here. The law itself, its definition, instances of sexual harassment, role of employer, and that is important because to my mind, in my own observation, in my circuit, in lecture circuit, I found that there are a lot of companies that are not complying with this. They're totally ignoring that. Don't ignore that because that is the law. You must comply. Okay. Sexual harassment in the workplace is defined. This is the ILO definition as any unwanted sexual attention that is explicitly or implicitly made a condition for a favorable decisions affecting one's employment, or that which creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment. Therefore, there are two factors in the sexual harassment which could happen. Either you made some sexual advances on the promise that you will employ her or promote her or do anything favorable to her, or in the absence of that, even if there was no promise, under this definition, if by virtue of your sexual advances, you create an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment to a workplace that already amounts to sexual harassment, for which that fellow or particular employee should be accountable for. It's a criminal offense. All right, remember that. Okay. Instances. A conduct that is offensive, unwelcome, unwanted by the person being harassed. It will be physical, like touching or kissing. It will be visual, like trying to show face. It could be gestural, like making a dirty finger or other dirty signs. It can also take the severest form, sexual assault, rape. And that to me, that is the most heinous crime to be committed by any particular person. He is worse than an animal. All right. Forms of harassment: verbal, request for demands for sexual favors, sexist jokes, meaning under the law, you can no longer make sexist jokes in the presence of women if they don't like it. Tell them that they're prude, but that's the law. All right. Teasing them with sexual undertones, physical, like kissing, malicious touching, overt sexual advances. Forms of harassment: gestural, suggestive gestures with lewd insinuations. Visual, use of object, you show them some pornographic magazines. or you give them dildo, that is sexual harassment. Even even whistling, that is a violation of the anti-sexual harassment law. Don't you know that? So be careful of that. You are not a wolf that does that. All right. What are the impact? Low morale of employees, high employee turnover, low productivity, high absenteeism, litigation, kindness, public image. Okay. Now, can there be sexual harassment of the same sex? Yes. Here is one instance. They made fun of a gay guy, hinobaran pa ang guy, and the commandant was laughing together with the other boys. That is a violation of the sexual harassment law. In short, through jurisprudence, in spite of the definition that is limited only to those particular factors, it can be committed also in the same sex, by the same, by boys to another boy, or by woman to another woman. Okay. Can a subject be a sexual harasser? Yes. Because through jurisprudence and through the law, it has expanded the concept of sexual harassment. Originally, the concept of sexual harassment is committed by a person in authority, or a professor, or a trainer in a training department. But right now, it is expanded even among peers and into subordinate, meaning a janitor who fall in love with somebody who is superior and refuse to grant to clean her the premises of that employee, and she can be accused of sexual harassment for feeling a jilted lover. Note the word. At the time when this bill was discussed in Congress, they added the word influence. That's why I put emphasis on the word influence. It is not only having authority or moral ascendancy, they included the word influence so that it can be committed by a subordinate, it can be committed among peers. All right? That's very clear. The word influence was added to make sexual harassment by co-employees punishable or even by a subordinate. So just remember that. All right. Here is now the definition of our local law. I just want to emphasize, just read through the bolder ones. Having authority, influence, or moral ascendancy over another. Regardless of whether, note this word, regardless of whether the demand, request, or requirement for submission is accepted by the object of said act. Meaning, even if the employee slept with with her boss, because the demander boss, she can still claim sexual harassment later on. Which reminds me of the the Me Too movement right now in America that is also raging in Europe, of celebrities being sexually harassed by the producers, by their bosses. In the case of Bill Cosby, there was sex by consensual adult. That was his defense, but he was still convicted. In the case of Weinstein, he's now behind bars. Even if there was consensual, even if there was consent on the part of the employee, there's still sexual harassment. So remember that, those elements. All right. But by jurisprudence, again, that was expanded, which I'm going to explain later on. Remember that under sexual harassment law, you can be accused civilly, criminally, administratively. The fact that you are being fired because of the adverse sanction, it does not bar the offended party to file a criminal case so that you will be put behind bars or you'll pay damages. Okay. Prescription 3 years. But the Supreme Court, in one case, in one particular case, somebody was subjected to sexual harassment, but she seemed to enjoy that because she was also an executive. During a party, everybody knew that she was fingered by another executive. She did not mind it, she did not protest, and she was dancing cheek to cheek with that particular individual. And later on, after a few years, when the crime was already prescribed, she filed a complaint. The Supreme Court said, you are not entitled to any to any remedy because you yourself have shown that you enjoyed it. In short, you are also a promiscuous person. But there is a reverse to that. There was somebody who suffered the same indignities without her consent, but because of fear of reprisal, because of fear of being ostracized by society or by her parents, after 3 years she filed, the Supreme Court granted her request. And the guy was charged and convicted criminally. So again, it depends on some circumstances. In short, the Supreme Court does not follow strictly the provisions of the law. Sometimes they go over what the law provides, and since they are the ultimate interpreter of the law, and any decision decided by the Supreme Court, it's now a case law. Another example, somebody, I will not mention names because fortunately there are three major cases of the Supreme Court who happen to be friends of mine. So I want to protect the names. But this is a case of somebody who was a superior, and suddenly he got fancy with a beautiful lady, and he touched the shoulders of the girl. I want you to become a lawyer. I'm willing to spend studies for you. And his fingers was trying to caress the ears of the lady, and the lady was standing still, shocked and humiliated. She ran out of her office and be absent, and she filed a case. And then it was investigated. And the defense of the guy is, look, under the law, there must be an offer for advancement, like promotion. I didn't offer anything. Sure, I offered to study, but that was only an offer. The Supreme Court said, even if there was no offer for employment or advancement in in their employment, since it makes, in short, the Supreme Court followed the ILO definition of sexual harassment, since it makes your environment hostile, abominable, and despicable, and uncomfortable. Therefore, you committed sexual harassment and you deserve to be punished. Okay? That is a leading case on anti-sexual harassment. Okay, here's the employer's role, last but not the least. Understanding the law, your specific duties, you must have a rule, implementing rules, providing some penalties for that as an employer. The second mechanism is CODI. What's CODI? To prevent or deter sexual harassment, and the rules must provide for procedure for investigation, administrative sanction, guideline of proper decorum, and the IRR must also provide that there must be policy and rules and regulations, call it code of conduct, code of decorum, or particular code of anti-sexual practices and all that. And the second mechanism is CODI, which is the code of the Committee on Decorum and Investigation. That is the function, to provide rules and regulations, and they accept complaints filed. It is not done through the HR, but any violations of the anti-sexual harassment law must be filed with the CODI, with the Committee on Decorum and Investigation. Therefore, you must start organizing one if you still don't have right now, because don't wait for the inspector to ask you about this. Okay, the compensation are management, union, if it is unionized, employees of supervisory rank, and rank and file. All right, duties of the CODI: conduct meetings, promulgate rules, receive complaints, investigate, and hear sexual harassment cases, prepare and submit reports with recommendations. The report is not only sufficient, you must make a recommendation whether he should be absolved or dismissed or etc. All right. That's the end. So I think we still have 26 minutes of questions. By the way, just one other thing about anti-sexual harassment. Supposing an employee was dismissed after that being charged and found out to be guilty of committing sexual harassment. And then in addition to that, The offended employee was not satisfied with the dismissal. She filed a case of criminal against him. Question. Then he was absolved after trial. And he goes back now to the company. I'm entitled, I have the right to be reinstated because I was absolved as innocent. Question. Should the company take him in? The answer is no. Because the quantum of proof required in a criminal case is proof beyond reasonable doubt. Whereas the quantum of proof required in administrative cases is only substantial evidence. And substantial evidence is defined as adequate evidence enough for a reasonable mind to make a conclusion. So that's the difference. In the case of criminal, if there is an iota of doubt, the accused is entitled to be declared innocent. All right? So that's the end. So Richard, I'm ready for other questions on the floor, if there are any. If there is none, then we can retire. Thank you all for your kind listening. Let me see if there, yeah. My time here, Aya, is 11:46. This is, hello, Richard. Oh, question, here's question, sorry. Let me see if this is a current question. Lalin Solis chemistry issue. No, that was already done. That was, I don't think there is other questions anymore. Do I hear any sign? Stop share. Aya can call me, Rachel can call me if there are still. Oh, here is one. Here's a question coming from Mr. Oliferno. Can a solo parent file for leave even without a solo parent ID? Thank you. When was the battered woman's leave made effective? The battered woman's leave, that was about 10 or 15 years ago. On your first question, a solo parent leave, I'm not sure whether the ID is required. I think the best proof is a certification from your barangay chairman that you are a solo parent, because they are the real witness to being a solo parent, that you are without a husband or a wife. And that's the best proof that you can find to be entitled to. Anyway, you might ask also the Department of Labor of that. But an ID, I think, does not require to be, it's not required. It's not required. Take one eye. If there are other questions, let me wait. From Faye Zabat. For a nurse working in a construction company, do we need to follow 5 working days a week or 6 days a week, just like the other employees? I think here being a nurse no longer applies to a nurse working in health facilities like a hospital. Since she's now working in a construction company, the rule on the 5 days a week does not apply. It should apply to the real role, which is 6 days a week. That's my answer. From Miss Maria Lourdes Bueno. We're just a small business, less than 5 employees. We just started barely 2 years. We're badly hit by this pandemic. I think I cannot sustain all expenses anymore. If I will permanently close my business, do I need to pay separation pay for my employees? What are the other payments I have to make for the employees and government agencies? What if my reason is bankruptcy? My dear Maria, You are engaged in micro business. Remember that the law applies only to companies that are employing 10 or more employees. For people employing less than 10, they're considered micro. They are not covered by any of the provisions of the law. Therefore, you can close it anytime. In fact, any company, even if they are covered by the labor standard laws, they can close anytime if they are bankrupt. No one can force, no law can force you to operate if you don't want to anymore. The only requirement is that you must inform your employees at least. Remember the twin written notes rule. In the case of authorized causes, that is closure, inform the employee 30 days in advance that you are terminating you'll be closing the company, and therefore he will be terminated. Inform the department, the appropriate department, the regional department of labor, of your intention to close at least 30 days in advance. Having done that, you have satisfied the requirement, and you must pay separation pay, which is 1/2 day per year of service. By the way, if the closure is due to severe losses, and severe is probably more than 50% of your capital or assets is gone, you can close your operation without paying anything. Your only obligation is to notify the employee 30 days in advance, and to the Department of Labor also 30 days in advance. That is your only obligation. But you are not monetarily obliged to give any money because you are bankrupt. Okay? Now, a question may arise, sir, if I go on a retrenchment and I'm supposed to notify them 1 day, 1 month in advance that he will be retrenched. And the feeling the employee is no longer with us. She might be angry and she might sabotage her operations. So therefore, I don't want to let her work anymore in my company after I notify him of the 1 month notice. Can I pay her, in addition to the separation pay, can I pay her the 1 month notice in lieu of letting him work for 1 month? The answer is no. That will be illegal. Your only alternative is to tell her, look, you don't have to report for work tomorrow. I understand your feelings. I would like you to go and find a job and then come back after 30 days. I'll pay you the 30 days. And that is legal. Okay, I hope that's clear. Let me see if there are any other questions. Practice of committing. Oh, here is a question. Here is another question from Miss Maria Bueno. Uh, we are just, well, I already answered that. From Miss Marites Abundiente, a company which has a practice of commuting to cash and use sick leave. That is very common. Pag hindi mo i-cash yan, magkakasakit yan on the first quarter of the year. Just able to use that. To maximum 7 days and use vacation leave to a maximum of 7 days. Is it legal to reduce the number of days equivalent to 5 days? A company which is practice of commuting to cash and use. In short, the sick leave is commutable to cash to a maximum of 7 days, and also in the case of vacation leave. Is it legal to reduce? Is it legal to reduce the number of days equal to 5 days? I think you can. I think you can. Because she is still entitled to that as long as it is no longer convertible to cash, as long as you carry it on. It is cumulative. Because if you don't make a cumulative addition to that, that might fall under the non-diminution provision. So the answer is yes, but qualified that it must be cumulative. Whatever she did not use, since you reduce it, you must add it on to the succeeding days of entitlement. Okay? From Christine Ignacio, hi sir. Regarding paternity leave, as I understand it, only the first 4 deliveries of the lawful wife is counted. Yes. With the expanded maternity leave law, which enables pregnant employees to allocate up to 7 days to their spouse and is applicable regardless of frequency, is the first 4 deliveries guideline for paternity leave still applicable even if it's already her fifth or beyond? Hmm. There is a conflict here between a specific law in the case of paternity leave, which is only allocable for 4 days, but in the case of the expanded maternity leave law, there is no limit. There is no limit. I think the specific law applies. I think the specific law applies. 7 days, which enables pregnant employees to allocate up to 7 days to the spouses the first 4 deliveries. Since the specific paternity leave law applies, requires only 4 deliveries, then that is the limit. It cannot apply in the case of expanded maternity leave law. That is my answer. All right, from Ms. Adrienne Estose. Our company is looking at reduced work days as part of our cost-cutting measures. 4 days per week, one unpaid day. Is it legal to also force an employee to use their vacation leave to compensate the unpaid day so he's still paid? Yes, you can. Up to the limit of the vacation leave. You can reduce that. All right. The only provision that I think I would advise you is that let her sign an agreement that she agrees to that and inform the Department of Labor that you are doing it just to play safe. Okay. Because like in the compressed work week, you are allowed to compress it from 6 days to 5 days, and you add 2 more hours to compensate for the loss of the 6th day or 1 hour, as the case may be, until it is to satisfy the 6 days period. But it must be agreed to by the employees, majority of the employees, in writing, and you must inform the Department of Labor. So applying the particular practice and rule, you can do that in your case. Okay. From Ms. Amy Entena. Is it allowed by law to apply to pay cut to Mancom employees with their consent? Yes. When you see Mancom, these are members of the management committee. Wow. These are the top honchos of the company. Right now, I've read a lot that many companies like Robinson and others are cutting off the pays of their executives. This is good. This is a good example that instead of laying off your people, you first you reduce the number cost by cutting the pay of the executives. That is a very good, laudable gesture. Okay. A follow-up on that question about solo parent leave. Is that convertible to cash? No, I didn't think so. I don't think so. You must spend that. The reason for that is that you must help. Okay, and use that. Yeah, from Miss Enriquez. Can a company, still from Miss Enriquez, can a company request from Dolly through COVID-19 adjustment measures program assistance for part-time employees? I think this is covered. This was discussed already in one webinar of PMAP. I think this was already covered. This is a role for this, so I cannot answer that. I'm not aware of that. But this camp role, there was a webinar made by PMAP, another webinar made by ECOP, wherein they invited, the one USEC and two ASEC. Okay. Question, can I put a request for Dole? I don't know. What is the difference between the solo parent and leave credit issued by the company? What is the difference between the solo parent and a leave credit issued by the company? A solo parent law, solo parent leave, you might be referring to the solo parent leave. That is a leave enjoyed by special law to solo parents. Leave credits issued by the company are different. Leave credits are, for example, a company by role. If you have achieved one year of service, you're entitled to 15 days vacation leave or sick leave. That's the difference. Solo parent leave is different from ordinary leaves. Okay, leave credits. What else? I still have 1 minute for questions. In my watch is 12, but tumatawad si Aya. 1 minute. Okay, I think time is up. All I can say is thank you for your kind listening. This is a very interactive audience
Yes,
for your
sir.
very interesting questions. And
Definitely,
thank you very much.
Attorney Nolly, 2 hours not enough for this session. So I think we need to have a follow-up session on this. And as soon as we have a date, we'll announce it to our members. Would you still be available
Okay.
to do that, sir?
Yes, for as long as I live, service to
Okay.
PMAP.
Okay. So again,
At your service, sir.
definitely, sir.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. So I think
I
that's
hope.
it. Mhm.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Okay, so again,
Bye bye.
this has been one of the webinars that we have really prepared for, and we still have 5 more webinars this week. So for all the attendees today, you might want to check our schedule posted in our Facebook account, and also to our members, we are sending you an email blast of the upcoming schedules. Again, Attorney Noli Payos, thank you for this wonderful session. Definitely a lot of questions went unanswered, but if you'd like to answer these questions, we will like to send it to you, and we'll send it back to those who send in to this to those
Sure,
persons.
sure.
That be okay?
You're
O-
welcome. You're welcome, Richard.
Okay, again, Attorney Noli Payos, thank you for this time, and
Okay,
definitely
bye bye.
we're pretty excited for our next session. Bye bye,
Stay safe.
Pimappers.
Bye
Keep safe,
bye.
everyone.